Today I'm going to be taking my pepper plants that I've been growing in soil and I'm actually going to move them over to Kratky Hydroponics systems. If you're unfamiliar with Kratky Hydroponics, it is a non-circulating form of hydroponics. And it's kind of for me, it's kind of the gateway into hydroponics. It's a super easy form and really easy just to kind of dip your toes if you want to try out hydroponics. I'm going to show you all about it today, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing you need to do is get a container that you're going to be using for your hydroponic grow. And for me, I just got these containers at Dollar Tree and they're just plastic containers with white lids, and I ended up spray painting mine. They were kind of clear and I didn't want the light to be going into the container. So you don't want the container that's going to be holding your hydroponic nutrients. You don't want light to be able to get into that, or else algae will grow and it's just not very good for it. What I've also used in the past, I've used baby formula containers, coffee containers, water bottles, all sorts of different things. And maybe one day I'll do a video on all the different types of containers you can do, but this is what I'm using today. The next thing we need to do is we need to get a hole in the top of this container to be able to drop our net cup into. And I'm going to be using a 3-inch net cup. And so for that, I need a 3-inch hole saw. Keep in mind, you don't need to use a hole saw for this. You can always just trace the outline of your net cup on the top of the container, and then you can just cut it with a razor blade or whatever you need to. I find that a hole saw works really well for this. When you go to start drilling in with your hole saw, you're going to want to use your drill and go forward all the way down until the point that the teeth of the hole saw actually make contact with the top of your container. Once that happens, you want to stop, put your drill in reverse, and go really fast in reverse. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a really smooth finish on your hole rather than a really jagged one. So there's no need to really file it down or sand it down or anything like that, because once you do this in reverse, it pretty much just sands it down for you. Now that we've got the hole in the top of our container, take your net cup and put it inside the hole and just make sure it fits really well. There's been a couple times where I've put the net cup in the hole after I drilled it and it didn't quite work out for me, but I feel like I've got it down pretty well now. So whatever size net cup you're using, you're pretty safe to just use that same size of hole saw. The next thing you want to do is, however many plants you're doing this with, however many systems you're making, I want you to go ahead and label them at this point. You want to make sure you have all your containers labeled beforehand so that way you don't get anything mixed up later on. For me, in the container I'm using, I'm able to just write it down right on the outside of the net cup and it works perfectly for me. Okay, at this point, we're ready to fill our containers with hydroponic nutrients. If you're not familiar with how to mix hydroponic nutrients, go down in the description and I'll leave a link for one of my last videos where I talk about how to mix these nutrients. It's super easy and even a beginner can do it. Now, when we fill these containers, you got to think about the root systems of the plants that you're putting into these containers. For me, I'm putting seedlings into these and the roots are only going to be a couple inches out the bottom of the Rockwool Cube. I need some good nutrients to root contact. So when I fill up these containers, I'm going to fill them all the way up until the nutrient level reaches the bottom of the net cup. So the net cup is already inside the container. Go ahead and just leave it in there and pour your nutrients through the top of that net cup and it'll just fill your container up until the point that your nutrient level is touching the bottom of that net cup. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our Rockwool cubes ready. I'm going to be using 2.5-inch Rockwool cubes for my 3-inch net pots. You kind of want to go about a 1/2 inch below the size of your net cup. What I do, especially for seedlings with not very well established root systems, I want to pre-moisten my Rockwool cubes. So to do that, I just put them into a little container and I pour some of the nutrients into the bottom and I moisten up the Rockwool cube with the hydroponic nutrients. Now take your first Kratky container that you have ready to go, ready to put your plant in, and whatever label you have on that container, take the plant that matches that label and be very careful at this point not to mix any of your plants around. So take the plant that needs to go into this container and go ahead and dig it out of the soil. Be as careful as you can not to disturb the roots, but it's most likely going to happen. It's okay. They will grow back. Pull the plant out of the soil and then rinse the roots off really well. Take a bowl of water or run them under the sink, whatever you need to do. Just go ahead and rinse off that soil. We don't need the soil anymore. Everything's going to be hydroponic from here on out. Now pick up one of the Rockwool cubes that you already pre-moistened and take a knife or some scissors or something like that, and I want you to cut a slit that goes from the center out to one side of the Rockwool cube. And what this is going to do is it's going to enable you to open up the Rockwool cube and slide a plant into it. I found that using a knife works best, but you can use scissors or anything else that you need to. Just make sure you get a nice slit cut down the middle of that Rockwool cube. Now take your plant that you just pulled out of the soil and rinse the roots off of, and you want to slide that plant into that slit that you created in your Rockwool cube. Just open up your Rockwool cube a little bit and place your plant in, and you want to have as many roots coming out the bottom as you can, but you also want to leave some of that stem coming out of the top. So you kind of have to balance that out a little bit and just do what works best for you. Don't worry if you have no roots coming out the bottom, this is still going to work for you, and I'll show you how to work with that later. For now, if you do have roots that can come out the bottom, go ahead and make sure those roots are coming out the bottom as much as possible while still leaving a decent sized stem out the top. Now we need to get our Rockwool cube into our net cup, and if you do have roots coming out of the bottom of your Rockwool at this point, you might need to cut a little bit of a bigger hole in the bottom of your net cup. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. For me, I had to on a couple of these. Just cut a little bit of a bigger hole in the bottom of the net cup, so that way you can feed your roots through the bottom as you push the Rockwool cube down into the bottom of that net cup. The goal here is to just seat that Rockwool cube down at the very bottom of the net cup while feeding the roots down through, so that way the roots can be hanging out the bottom. At this point, you might harm a couple roots, but it's okay. They will grow back. It's not really a big deal. Now that you have your Rockwool cube inside your net cup and the roots hanging at the bottom, if you have roots at this point, go ahead and place your net cup into your Kratky container. Your roots should be touching the nutrients that you filled up to the bottom of that net cup. If you didn't have roots that came out of the bottom of that Rockwool cube, don't worry too much about it, but what you will want to do is make sure you keep that Rockwool moist with the hydroponic nutrients. You don't want to let it dry out at all until you have those roots that are coming out the bottom and reaching into the hydroponic nutrients. Once they reach into the nutrients, you should never have to keep the Rockwool moist. Just go ahead and let it dry out, because what's going to happen is your plant is going to create air roots that kind of form up there by that Rockwool, and they're going to be really white, kind of fuzzy roots. Those roots are going to be specifically just searching out for air. And so they're going to be getting the air that is between the top level of your hydroponic nutrients and the Rockwool cube. That's how these plants will get oxygen, since this is a non-circulating form of hydroponics. And that's why once you have an established plant with roots, you want to make sure you keep that Rockwool dry, because those air roots are not going to want to be getting wet. Okay, so now you've got your Rockwool cube that you can kind of see down in the bottom of that net cup with your plant in it. And now let's take some clay pebbles, and I've rinsed mine off beforehand, and you just kind of place them in around your plant. And this is going to do a couple of things. This is going to stabilize your plant, so that way it stays upright and it's held really well and stable. And it's also going to stop the light from hitting the Rockwool and creating algae on top of that. The clay pebbles are very important. Definitely don't skip out on those. They're super cheap on Amazon. So keep an eye on these plants for the next couple of weeks. You're going to want to make sure that the roots are kind of following that nutrient level down, that you're growing new roots and everything's working out really well. Once you start getting those air roots that I talked about, make sure you pull back on watering or letting the Rockwool cube get any nutrients up in there. You want to make sure you keep that nice and dry. Another really important thing to think about when you're dealing with Kratky hydroponics is eventually your levels are going to start dropping as those roots are sucking in all these nutrients, and you're going to be tempted to just kind of keep topping it off with new nutrients. If you do that, you're going to end up throwing off the nutrient levels as well as the pH. You can do it once or twice, but really it's best to completely dump the nutrients that are in that tub, rinse it out really well, and then put new hydroponic nutrients in there, so that way you get fresh nutrients all the time, and your plants are really going to benefit from that. If you found this video helpful, go down and hit the like button. That's going to tell YouTube that you guys like the video, and then hopefully YouTube will show other people that might also like the video. And the next thing you should do is go watch this video right here, where I teach you guys how to mix your hydroponic nutrients. Kind of a beginner's guide to hydroponic nutrients, as well as adjusting your pH and how to test your pH and how to read the labels on the hydroponic nutrients bottles. And I really hope it can help you guys out.